going to talk about the recent financial meltdown, what just happened, and what we might be able to do to fix it. The bailouts that we've seen recently are out of control. They've already promised or spent or committed or lent $2.7 trillion for all these various things. That's on top of a federal debt that now is up to $10 trillion. You can see from this chart, this goes back to 1940, but actually the federal debt has never been paid off since the 1830s when Andrew Jackson shut down the second U.S. bank and took the money out and paid off the debt. So you can see it's been growing ever since. So if you add 2.7 trillion up here, we just increased the debt by more than a quarter in a year, a debt that's been growing for at least 70 years here. This is an exponential curve. You can see that the debt is growing exponentially. That the last bit that we've added onto it is up here somewhere. This is a mathematical exponential curve. In math, it would go up to infinity here. But if you have some sort of finite food source or some limit on your ability to grow, this is what happens. You hit the wall and it just drops right back down. So in this case, the limit is the amount of, either the amount of interest that we can afford to pay on our debt, since we never pay it off. All we ever do is pay the interest, or the ability to find willing borrowers to keep rolling the debt over. Every time these bonds come due, somebody has to be found to buy new bond, or to replace those bonds. Oops. So what we have here is a pyramid scheme. The reason it's this pyramid scheme is that our entire money supply comes from banks in the form of loans, except for coins, which compose only 1/1000th of the money supply. It's the nature of a pyramid scheme or Ponzi scheme that new investors, or in this case borrowers, have to be found continually, have to be sucked in at the bottom continually to support the lenders at the top, until finally the whole world becomes indebted, which has happened here. It's been 300 years that this Ponzi scheme's been going on, ever since the Bank of England, 1694. And we've managed to indebt, or I shouldn't say we, the private international banking cartel, if you will, has managed to indebt the third world, and now they're back to us. And so the latest debt bubble was the housing bubble, and then when they ran through all the people that could actually afford mortgages, they went into the subprime, the people that couldn't afford the mortgages, and now there's no one left. Okay, this is the money supply, M3 money supply. This down here is M1, M2, M3. M1 is what we normally think of as money. It's coins, dollars, and checkbook money. That's like Federal Reserve notes and checkbook money. So the actual physical money, coins and dollar bills, is only about 3% of the money supply. That comes to about there. And then, and dollar bills are actually issued by a private banking corporation, the Federal Reserve, and lent to the government. So they're not issued by the government either, and they are issued as loans from the private banking industry. And that only composes 3% of the money supply. So the question is, what is all this? 97% of the money supply consists of electronic money that is generated as loans by banks. That's so hard for us to get our minds around. It's so foreign to what we've been taught that it's hard to believe, but many authorities have attested to it. I have a couple of pages of them here, but I'll just read the first couple. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in inequity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money, and with a flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. That was said by Sir Josiah Stamp, who was president of the Bank of England in the 1920s, and he was speaking at the University of Texas. Then Graham Towers, governor of the Bank of Canada, said, banks create money. That is what they are for. The manufacturing process to make money consists of making an entry in a book. That is all. each and every time a bank makes a loan, new bank credit is created, brand new money. Banks do not lend their depositors money, and they do not lend their own money. They create new money every time they make a loan. Okay, I'll skip down to the horse's mouth here, the Chicago Federal Reserve at the bottom. This is from a little booklet called Modern Money Mechanics. It was originally published in 1963, but it was republished all the way up till 1992. Of course, banks do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. If they did this, no additional money would be created. What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes in exchange for credits to the borrower's transaction accounts. Loans or assets and deposits or liabilities both rise by the same amount. The way it's done is through double entry bookkeeping. For example, if you go to a bank to take out a $500,000 loan, you will sign a document called a mortgage, and that is a negotiable instrument with a present value. And so the bank will put that on one side of its books as an asset of its own, because you've promised to pay that back over time. And then on the other side of their books, they'll write the same $500,000 as a credit into your account or a liability to themselves, because they owe you that money. So at the end of the day, they'll say, well, we didn't create anything. It all comes out to zero. But in fact, this deposit that they just made on your behalf is what you spend into the economy, and that's what becomes our currency. This chart was actually also in the booklet Modern Money Mechanics. It makes it quite clear. This is what happens with a 10% reserve requirement. The Federal Reserve requires banks to maintain 10% of their deposits on reserve. Well, you would think that that would mean that here's your deposits, and that means you can lend out 90% of your reserves. You would think that that would mean that they would lend out all this here, like 90% of this 10% reserve. This is $10,000. But you can see that that's not what it means. That $10,000 stays in the bank. That's your money. If you're the depositor, you expect to be able to draw on that money at any time. You don't expect that somebody has just borrowed it for a 30-year loan. So what happens is the bank creates 90% of that. On top of this 10,000, the bank can lend out 9,000. That's created out of nothing, created on their books. And then that money is going to go into some other bank probably, and then that becomes a deposit, which can be 90% of that can be lent out, or $8,100, and it just continues up and up and up. This is more pillars here until that happens 20 times, and by the time it's all the way up to here, you've got $100,000. So your $10,000 has been fanned into $100,000 in loans. At the same time, this is a chart of inflation, or a decline in purchasing power of the dollar, as the amount of money out there increases, the purchasing value of the money decreases. So you can see it's the same sort of exponential curve as those others, except that this one's going the other way. And the problem is what we used to call the miracle of compound interest. You usually see these charts as something that's exciting and wonderful if you're an investor, because you can put your $10,000 in the bank when you're 25 here, and if you leave it in for 40 years, your $10,000 becomes $100,000. But that works the other way. Somebody has lost all that money. So that's the bankers or the lenders. If you're the lender, that's a good thing. But the banks are accumulating all this money off the top, and that's why you have to have a continually expanding money supply, or otherwise, say you started with $100. And you let banks lend 10% of that and roll it over with principal and interest continually. In a mere 40 years, they would have all the gold or all the money, unless you have an expanding money supply. This is a chart of the interest on the federal debt. You see that it too is an exponential curve going off into the stratosphere. That's only up till 1990, so you can imagine where it is now.